In this segment, we have Jessica Harris. Jessica Harris is an author, international speaker, and the creator of beggarsdaughter.com. She was exposed to pornography at the age of 13 and for years struggled in silence and shame. After finding freedom, she started her blog in 2009 in the hopes of changing the conversation and helping women find freedom from a struggle no one believed they could have. In addition to her personal blog, she's written for many organizations, including Campus Crusade for Christ, Focus on the Family, and the Lies Young Women Believe blog. She's also authored 2 books, including Beggar's Daughter, a memoir sharing her story of struggle and how she found freedom. And Jessica believes that if we're silent about the struggle, we are silent about grace. So Jessica, thank you for being with us for the She Summit.
Oh, thank you, Crystal. Thank you for having me.
So we're just going to dive in like everybody else so far in this summit. I've just said, you know what, let's not beat around the bush at all. And let's just dive right in. Talk about your story. Share your story about where you were, how you got there, and then, where you are today and how God is using your story.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home, a very conservative Christian family, like church every Sunday, like 3 times on Sunday, and then on Wednesday, and pancake breakfasts and missions conferences and big tent revivals. Like we were always at church and did family devos and prayed before meals. And so I grew up in a Christian home. It was a broken home. My dad did leave when I was 7 years old, and he was abusive. And so he has child abuse on his record because of things that he did to me. But still, it was a good family. Like we loved Jesus and we talked about the Bible. And then when I was 13, I was researching for school. The internet was kind of new. This is back in like 1999 in the age of like floppy disks and fun things like that, and dial-up. And I was researching for school and I found a porn video. It was on another website full of little video clips that were completely innocent, and they were actually educational. And then there was this porn video clip in amongst all of these for children videos. And I remember clicking on it and going, like, what is this? And what am I? And being like equally parts fascinated and disgusted at the same time, and not really sure what I was seeing and like if I should keep looking at it or if I shouldn't, and tried to click out of the screen, and it ended up like taking me through all these pop-up windows and into an actual porn website that just had constantly running video clips. So I became absolutely fascinated almost, because this was like the world of things I didn't know about. We did not talk about sex in my family. I joke that I'm like 34 years old and my mom and I still have not had the talk. We just not something we talked about. And in church, the extent of talking about it was that you didn't talk about it. It was the thing that no one talks about. And so for me, it's like, oh, this is what people are trying to hide from me. This is it. And so there was this feeling of, I don't know, maybe like excitement. Like I was figuring something out that people were trying to hide from me. Like, so there was this almost an element of fun in a way. And then I did get caught by my mom at one point, probably a year after I started watching, and she freaked out. And she said, like, I don't know what I've done wrong as a mom. It's like, just tell me you're never going to watch this again. Just tell me you were just curious and then you're never going to do this again. And I tell parents, like, don't tell your kids what to say, because they'll just say what you want them to say. So I said, I was just curious and I'll never do it again. But all it really ended up doing was making it so I figured out how I wouldn't get caught. So I learned how to clear internet history. I learned how to clear the history and then type in other websites that were educational. So it did look like I was doing schoolwork all afternoon. And I would call my mom while she was at work. When I got home from school, I would figure out how long she was going to be at work. And then I would go, well, I'll be, researching for school all afternoon. And she'd go, oh, I'm so proud of you. Like, that's my girl. And really, I was just going in and watching porn for hours. So I was a straight A student. There was nothing in my life really that would say like, she's got a problem. Like there was nothing like that. And I think I maybe went above and beyond to make sure that there was nothing like that in my life. I was active in church. I was active in youth group. I was leading in the youth group. I was singing in choir. I was anything that you could do as a Christian young woman, I was doing it. I attended a public school. I was the teacher's pet. But as I got near the end of high school, my use got really, really, I would say, severe and really bad. I started going into very extreme and violent fetishes and types of pornography that I'd be watching for hours. I would watch after I got home from school. I'd watch for hours, and my mom would come home. I'd wait for her to go to sleep, and then I would go out and like try to watch on the TV. Even though we didn't get those channels, obviously back in that time, you could still kind of see things every now and then slip through the channels that you didn't get. And so I would just watch those channels for hours at night. And I learned how to make sure that I put the remote control back exactly where it was, make sure that I put the channels back where they were. Like I knew how to cover my tracks. I had learned how to trick people and deceive people. At school, I was working in the library as a library aide. I was also a teacher's aide. And so I would spend my lunch breaks in a teacher's classroom reading erotica on a school computer. I would do it in the library as well. And nobody questioned it because I'm a 4.0 student. Like I'm top of my class. I'm sitting in front of a screen full of text. They all just assume I'm reading something for school. So I tell people it was like air to me. Like if I wasn't actively doing something else, then I was doing pornography in some way, shape, or form, either videos or erotica or fantasy, even making it up myself. So near the end of my high school years, I started to lose sleep. Actually, like it was so bad. I was losing sleep. I was up until like 3 or 4 in the morning watching the TV and then crashing for 2 hours so I could get the bus, and go to school. And my grades were struggling. And that's when I was like, okay, I've got a problem. We got to get this under control, because to me, it wasn't like I need to stop. It was like, I just need to control this. Like this is a perfectly acceptable, in my mind, this is a perfectly acceptable outlet. I'm not sleeping around with people. I'm not going to have to worry about getting an STD. I'm not going to have to worry about getting pregnant. I'm not going to have to worry about this stuff. This is acceptable. This is not really sex. I'm still a virgin. God still loves me. This counts. So my problem was it was just too much. Like I just need to tone it back a little bit. It's a little out of control. And then I couldn't. I would try to cut myself back. I would try to like set a time limit and go, okay, today I'm only going to do this for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And I tell people it's a bit like binge watching on Netflix. Like you just lose track of time, and 4 or 5 hours later, I would realize it's been 4 or 5 hours, and I'd be mad at myself, and I would go in and I would start to self-harm. I would try to like bang my head against the bathtub. I would try to scald myself with hot water, like all these things to try to get myself to stop, because I thought if I can make this hurt, then I'll stop, because it was out of control. I didn't know how else to control it. So I knew I was in trouble and I started looking for help. This is 2003, and there was absolutely nothing for women, nothing. And I remember thinking, am I the only woman in the world who's got herself into this mess? Like everything's for men. There are all kinds of resources, and even I can still remember my pastor saying during an altar call once, like, men, what you're watching online. And like, I knew what he was talking about, but I was like, but I'm not a man. So like, what about me? Like, what about people like me, the women who are watching this stuff? So I actually started to pray that I would get caught, because I was so afraid to tell somebody that I struggled with this. Like I had spent years trying to build up this perfect image for people. I was the 4.0 student, top of my class. I was going to go be a doctor. I was active in church. I never missed a service. My grandfather was a deacon. My grandmother was a Sunday school teacher. My mom worked in the nursery. We just had there was this image, and I thought there's no way I can go into my pastors, who are older men and say, I struggle with pornography, and there's no way I can go to their wives either. Like, it just felt like there was nowhere I could go with that to get help. And so I actually started to pray that I would get caught, because to me, it seemed easier if someone else started the conversation. I tell people, yes is easy. Yes is, I can take a deep breath and say yes. So if you say, Jessica, do you struggle with pornography? I can take a deep breath and be able to spit out a yes. Mm-hmm. But don't expect me to walk in and to destroy that image on my own. Like, I need help doing that in a way. Like, I need help destroying the image that I've built. And so I did. I prayed that I would get caught, at the same time praying that I wouldn't get caught. So I kind of like lived in this, all right, God, like, if you want me to stop, break the internet. Like, I'm going to type in this website and I'm going to hit enter. And if you don't want me to do this anymore, it shouldn't work. And obviously it would work. So I would go, well, God, like, I don't know why you're not helping me out here. I don't know why you're not helping me stop. I went off to Christian college and I did get caught. They track your internet history there. So I got the summons to the dean's office and I knew what it was for, but I still like tried to play it cool. Can you tell me what this is about? They're like, you just need to come in. Okay. So I went in and they had my history report printed off and they had it in a folder, and they had gone through and highlighted the websites that were obviously pornographic, that the name of the website was clearly pornography. And I remember that was the first time that I was kind of hit with how much I was watching, like how bad my problem was. Like, I was there at a Christian college. I had a roommate. We were in a tiny dorm room and I had the giant, early 2000s desktop computer that we shared, she and I shared. And I would stay up all night watching pornography on this computer. And what I would do is I would open up like a Word document. So that took up the whole screen. And then I would tuck the little porn videos down in the corner and just watch them all night with her sleeping right behind me. And then it was almost like high school again. I would sleep for a couple hours and then I would go do my morning work study job. I had to vacuum one of the student centers. Then I would come back and I would sleep through my classes because I was so tired. So it didn't get better when I went to college. It almost in a way got worse. And then I had gotten caught. And I remember thinking, please just let me say yes. Let me tell you. And like, hopefully you're a Christian college. You have all kinds of Christian young women. Like, surely somebody else you've seen this before. You know what to do and how to help you. And instead, the dean of women looked at me and said, we know this wasn't you. Like, women just don't have this problem. And she proceeded to reprimand me for handing out my password to multiple of my male friends because they were sure that's what had to have happened, that I was covering for my brothers in Christ and I should be ashamed of myself for doing so, and that I needed to be helping them like get help and being like, I needed to let them get caught so that they could get help. And I just remember thinking, but it's me, like, and there was not an opportunity even to say that. I had to sign a contract saying I would never give out my password again. And then that was the end of that discussion. It was basically, if this happens again, you have to go home. And okay, so I went back to my dorm room and I remember just thinking, like, what's wrong with me? If the dean staff at a Christian college has never seen this before to the point that they're like, women just don't do this, then what on earth is wrong with me? Like, I am the only woman in the world who's managed to get herself into this mess, and I don't know how to get out. I gave up. I felt like I had lived so long with this mask in a way, and I was done. If I couldn't be the good Christian girl who watched pornography, then I was just going to have to be the porn star who used to be a Christian. Like, in my mind, I was done playing the games. Like, I couldn't keep going through life on 2 hours of sleep every night, trying to be the doctor and then the good overachiever. Like, I was done. So I was 17 years old at a Christian college, and I decided I was going to be a porn star. That was my life mission. And it's just because I felt like I couldn't be anything else. Like, I wasn't capable of being anything else at that point. And I did start an online relationship with a man, and he asked me for pictures. And so I sent them. I was 17 years old, not even legal, in my dorm room on a Christian college campus. I became someone else's pornography. And tell people that's what's so unique about pornography. It's the one addiction that you can actually become. I can't become drugs. I can't become alcohol. I can't become any other addiction, but I can become pornography. A person can become a thing. And when you do that as a woman, it breaks something in you almost. It robs you of something. It takes what's supposed to be this beautiful acceptance of you, body and soul and person, and it rips that all apart and just turns you into a body for somebody else to use. And that's several years ago now, 17 years ago, actually. And it's still one of the, I would say, the biggest regrets in my life, and one of the things that I struggle with the most, because they talk about how it's like empowering and it's, you're taking control of your body, but I don't have control of my body. 17-year-old me is still floating around out there somewhere. I don't have control over that anymore. I lost control over 17-year-old me. And so that was my really low point. I left college after that and went back home trying to figure out how I was going to tell my family that I was going to be a porn star. And actually started looking up how to become one, like trying to find the apply now button. And they didn't have them. Thank goodness. Like, it's not like applying to the grocery store. So that was good. And then God just did a lot of work in my life. That those few months that I was home, and that following fall, I ended up going to Bible college, which is where all porn stars end up. But I ended up at Bible college and thought, okay, God, I'm gonna give this another shot, but you have to understand something. This comes with me. Like, this is part of my life. This porn addiction is part of my life. I've tried. I can't get free of it. No one knows how to help me. So I'm going to try to love you and serve you and do whatever you want, but this comes with me. Like, that's just how it is. Too bad. And so while I was there at college, they had a women's meeting. They had gathered all of the female students into this women's conference, kind of this devotional, if you will. And the dean staff talked about strongholds. And at the end, they said, we know some of you in this room struggle with pornography, and we're going to help you. And I remember, like, what? And you could almost like feel the air kind of just like leave the room, because like half of them were like, oh, they actually just said that. And the other half were like, that's me. Like, how did you know? And I remember thinking, I am the only person in this room. I don't know how they knew it was me, but I'm going to tell them. Super scary. Probably one of the scariest things I've ever done. And so they encouraged us to write down whatever our strongholds were on a sheet of paper. And so I did. I wrote out, my name is Jessica Harris and my stronghold is pornography. And I rolled that paper up like super tiny, like little tiny scrolls. And I handed them to like the two women that I was supposed to, like, in the dean staff above me. And I really kind of hoped that they would lose them, but they didn't. And later that night, the one dean staff member, Sarah, came to my room, and I thought they were going to send me home. This is it. It's over. Like, they lied. They were just trying to get rid of all the bad girls. They only want the good girls here. They don't want, women like me here. And I remember like preparing my speech, begging her to let me stay because I didn't want to get sent home. But she spoke first, and she said, what you wrote in that paper was brave, and we're going to help you. And I started doing counseling with one of the members of dean staff. We worked through a Bible study on pornography. It was written for men, but she kind of helped. She's like, don't read that part. Don't read this part. Don't skip that story. Ignore this one. And he's like, here you go. Like, do these. We're going to answer these questions, but we're going to change the questions a little bit because they're kind of more for men. So we're going to change them to this. And we tweaked it a little bit, but we ended up working through that. And I'd still say it took me probably close to 2 years to really feel like I had found, like, finally broken free and finally found freedom. And then a couple years after I graduated from that school, I started Beggar's Daughter. And I remember feeling like, what am I supposed to do with my life now? Like I was going to be a doctor and then I was going to be a porn star. Now I'm just stuck. Like I don't know what to do. And there was just this challenge almost to share my story. And I remember going, I'm not sharing my story. Like the whole point was like keep people from knowing that. Like I'm not telling people about that. And so I did it kind of anonymously, almost like in an angry, like, God, I don't want to do this way. Like this is pointless. No one needs this. And within months of first sharing my story online, I had women, even friends of mine who I had no idea, reach out to me and say, oh my goodness, me too. And I kind of stepped back and went, whoa, like this is a lot bigger than me, just me struggling with this. Like this is a much larger problem. And so over the years, it's been trying to help people see that it's not just one woman in the world figured out how to do this and she's struggling with it and that's it. Like this is a much bigger problem. It's much deeper. And I think more recently, I think I realized that it's much more damaging than we understand. I think we're maybe just now starting to kind of tap into the damage that this can do to a woman's heart and how she views herself and relationships and her body. And so that's a journey I've had to walk through as I got married later. So I got married. When did I get married? I got married 2 years ago. And just that coming up into marriage, even though I had been talking about freedom and sharing freedom from a stage for so many years, still suddenly going, I suddenly don't feel free anymore. Like I suddenly feel very chained down by shame and guilt. And I'm walking into this marriage going, I've already broken our marriage. Like we haven't even gotten to start yet. And I've already set us back so far. So I did. I ended up going to counseling before we got married just to work through some of those underlying issues of maybe trauma and the damage caused by pornography and breaking through some of that shame. So I didn't bring that into our marriage. And I didn't start marriage feeling like I had already, broken it. And it's been good. We've been married, like I said, almost 2 years. Our anniversary is coming up here. So it's been a journey. It's been good.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, I've obviously known of you since forever, it seems like now. What's funny is, we both kind of started our ministry blogging, writing our stories online, like probably the same day of the same year. In 2009, I had started leading groups a couple of years before that, just, in my personal life. But it's funny how big the internet is, right? And how we don't really realize other women are writing about these things. Other women are talking about these things, but because it's still so cloaked in shame and silence, we don't know about each other's stories. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've even figured out from this summit too, is I actually scoured YouTube. I scoured blogs looking for women who are talking about this that maybe don't have a platform yet, or who we don't know about, mm-hmm. who are talking about it, but are talking about it really quietly because no one's talking about it globally, mm-hmm. On a larger scale. But you and I both, you specifically with your blog is a pioneering effort. It's one of the first women's blogs, to talk about these issues, to talk about it from a personal perspective, not just a purity culture standpoint, mm-hmm. really talking about, the journey of the woman who has pornography addiction and the way that your addiction escalated and manifested itself is powerful to hear. And I love your illustration of, I could become porn. I can't become drugs or alcohol, but I can become the thing I'm addicted to. And I think that's really powerful as well. So thank you for sharing that aspect of it too. You were talking about counseling, before you got married. Would you suggest to someone else that maybe going to counseling sooner would have been helpful?
Yeah, that's really actually an interesting question. So the family I grew up in is like anti-counseling.
Right.
They're very much like Jesus fixes everything. And so if you just love Jesus hard enough, you don't need a counselor. Like they're, evil, like worldly people that don't believe in loving God. So I kind of grew up being almost anti-counseling. And I was actually sent to anger management counseling in college. So after I got caught, and they told me women don't have this problem, and I gave up, I became like furiously angry with everybody. Like I was a raging ball of fire. And so they're like, you need to go to the anger management counseling. And so I remember sitting in the chair and just thinking this woman was an absolute joke. And like, she wants me to cry. Okay, I'll cry. And so I like started crying. She's like, oh, we're getting somewhere. I was like, you're an idiot. Like, I'm not getting anywhere. But it's interesting because I feel like, yes, I would encourage women to go to counseling, but I think the specific timeline for me works. I don't know if I would have necessarily known of the issues before I was engaged and preparing to get married. So the big thing that I ended up having to go to counseling for was, as we were preparing to get married, my husband wanted to have open and honest conversations about sex. And I can stand on a stage and talk about sex, but for whatever reason, like talking to my future husband, like scared me half to death. Mm-hmm. And he really wanted to like have these honest conversations. My husband's a marriage counselor. So like he wanted to have these honest conversations about expectations and things like that. And wanted to read, the books, and I did not want to read the books. And I actually had a panic attack because I just like all of a sudden this image that I had of sexuality in marriage wasn't a loving and compassionate one. It was being overwritten almost by like my history in pornography, even though I had been free from it for years. Now that I was like on the brink of being married and sleeping with somebody for the first time, the only thing I could see looking forward was the pornography from my past and going, oh my goodness, this is going to be abusive and it's going to be horrible and I'm going to hate this and I'm going to feel used and and I'm like, can we just stay engaged for forever? Like, I like you and I love you and I kind of want to, be yours, but like, can we not sleep together? Like, can we just stay in a permanent state of engagement and never have to sleep together? Which was confusing for me because I would always tell people like I felt like I was a woman with a high sex drive, obsessed with sex. And then when I was finally standing at the border of finally being able to do this, it was terrifying to me. And then that terrified me because it's like, what's wrong with me? Like, I love my husband and I know he's a very kind man and that he would never do anything to hurt me, but I can't get over this hurdle of just feeling like I'm going to be used and I'm going to be abused and I'm going to be hurt. And I'm going to become his toy and his plaything. Like, this is going to be this terrible experience. I don't know that I would have felt that way, 5 years ago when I wasn't engaged and almost ready to be married. It's definitely something that I encountered in those moments. And so I think if anything, even if you have gone to counseling as a woman, if you encounter a new kind of hurdle or a new layer of healing that's needed, it's okay to go back. Like, absolutely. It's okay to go back and say, you know what, actually, like, found something new, like found a new thing. And my counselor really helped me realize that because she said something that was so powerful and it stuck with me because I felt so guilty that I was struggling with this and that I wasn't like the typical, yay, like we get to do this soon, like that I was so scared and so afraid. And I felt like, look at me, I've already ruined our marriage. Like, we haven't even started yet. I've already messed it up. And she said, Jessica, you have to stop looking at your past with pornography as sin and addiction and stop beating yourself up for it and stop carrying that guilt. You've got to start looking at it as trauma and abuse because that's what you're dealing with now. Like, that's the damage you're dealing with now. This is not payment for what you've done. These are wounds that need healing. Like, this is not something you have to walk around with because you've done this. Like, you're allowed to heal. Yeah. And that was so powerful for me to be able to step back and kind of go, yes, pornography, I chose you, but you abused me. Like, I did willingly sit down in front of the computer and do this for years. But now there's trauma that happened there. That's trauma. And I'm allowed to heal from that. I don't have to keep carrying you around with me. And there was healing that happened there. So I think definitely pursue counseling. And then if you need to, go back, like, keep going back. And as you find those other layers of your life that need more healing, that's okay. Like, the healing doesn't happen all at once, and you might heal up here and then you go into this new thing and then you've got to heal in another layer, and that's okay.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability with that, and just the and the fact that there's possibly a need to go to counseling initially, but if you need to go back, and that's okay. There's no shame in counseling. So talking about shame, which is obviously a large theme of female addiction throughout the summit and throughout our experiences in addiction and through our recovery. What did shame say to you during your struggle?
I think it said that you'll never be free. I think that was the big thing. I remember when I finally told somebody in college, turned in those little slips of paper and was walking away. It was almost like the devil was on my back going like, what do you think you're doing? Like, that they're just trying to get rid of the bad girls. Like, you're never getting away from me. You're mine. Like, and it was just this feeling of you're never getting free. Like, you tell somebody and there's no hope for you. Like, you will forever be branded like this. You're never getting married. You're never going to be successful. No one's ever going to take you seriously. Like, there was just so much just feeling like there is no future beyond this. Like, your growth stops here, or your future stops here. Like, it begins and ends with this, and you will forever be branded. And even when I first started sharing my story, I was like, God, please don't make me do this, because I don't want people to know this about me. I really it's not the first thing I want people to know. And it became that. It became, oh, you're Jessica Harris. You're the one who writes about porn. Like, can you get to know me first before you, make judgments about who I am based on my story? But I think that was it was almost this, like, you don't have a future beyond this. Like, this is your life. This is your future. Like, you're stuck here. Have a nice life. Like, this is it. You're not going any further. There's no freedom. There's no hope. There's no, all of your dreams and ambitions gone. And I feel like that's really what shame that's the message almost of, like, no one can help you. You're stuck here. Like, you're mine forever. Good luck. That's what I feel like it was for me.
And in your recovery and in your journey, your personal story, how did you silence shame? How was shame silenced? How were those lies that were being spoken over you become silent?
Yeah, so that's actually, I guess, almost by challenging them. So when I confessed and was dealing with that whole, they're not going to help you, you're stuck, they're going to send you home, like, you're mine, this is it, it's over. And when I was met with what you said was brave, and we're going to help you, I tell people, it's like in that moment, I all of a sudden had this strength to almost like whirl around and like look at the devil and go, you're a liar. Like, you've been lying to me for 4 years. There has been help this whole time, and I'm getting out of here. Like, and I feel like even throughout my journey, that's a theme that's repeated over and over and over again. So when I share my story for the first time online and kind of feel like, oh my goodness, this is not a good life choice here. And then to have women emailing in and saying, this is my story, like, this is me too. And kind of being able to turn around again and go, you told me I was alone. You're a liar. And like, I just kept running into situations like that where it was like, okay, this is what I feel. Like, I feel like I have no hope. I have no, I guess, future if I make this decision, or if I invite this shame in a way. And then honestly, like, the thing that's been so freeing to me is actually how other people have responded. So like, when you're willing to kind of step up and take that risk, you invite grace. But it's hard because sometimes you don't get it. When I started sharing my story, my family was not thrilled about this because I was inviting shame onto the entire family. And so that's something that I struggled with, and I kind of had to go, okay, God, what's the truth that combats this? Like, what's the truth that combats this shame? Because that's what I need. Shame's a lie. So what's the truth that combats this? And just clinging so hard to grace and believing that that there was layers of healing that had to happen even in my family. But I think that's perhaps that, like, just going to God and going, what's the truth? What's the truth that combats this? Because I've learned that shame's a liar, and it will lie to you about your identity. It'll lie to you about hope. It'll lie to you about freedom. It'll lie to you about your future. And you have to be willing to kind of dig your heels in and go, I don't believe you. And so I'm going to the true source of my identity and the true source of hope and the true source of my future. And I'm going there, and I'm getting my information from there, not from shame. And that's hard because you can get shame kind of from other things than just like in your own head. You can feel shamed by your family. Like I have a pastor's daughter who just wrote to me earlier this week. Like, I'm 15 years old and I'm a pastor's daughter. Like, what am I supposed to do? I struggle with this, but I can't tell my dad. Like he's going to hate me. There's so much shame. And how do you in those moments kind of go, what's the truth? And what am I willing to do in this moment? It's hard when you're 15, you can't exactly like, I'm leaving the house. And like, you gotta, right. There's healing there that has to happen in the family system too. But, and I've seen so much healing even in my family over the past several years as my family has learned, oh, there is grace. Like, it's not just about all the rules that we have to keep as Christians. Like there's grace, and there's this grace that kind of erases the labels that we would put on ourselves. Like, I don't walk around going, I'm a former porn addict. Like, that's not who I am. That's part of my story, but that's not who I am. And so I think just really clinging hard to that identity that God gives us. It was really hard, and I'm sure you can echo this too, to be single so long and kind of feel like this is my payment for what I've done. Like, this is either my payment for my past in pornography or for speaking up about it now. Like, either way, no one wants to be with me. And then just another layer of God's grace. My husband and I met because he read my book. So he read Beggar's Daughter and reached out to me. And so there was no, I'm afraid of him finding out my story. Like, that's how we met. And there was just this, when he talks about it, he goes, I just saw this woman who was free. Like, I didn't see this woman who had this, past that was so bad. He's like, I saw a woman who loves Jesus and was free. Like, and so I think just clinging hard to what God says and what his truth is and that identity, and learning how to kind of spin around and look shame in the face and say, you're a liar. Like, you're a liar. And I'm leaving because the door's not locked. And I know it's not. Like, I know it's open, and I know that there's hope and freedom out there. You're lying to me, and getting out that way.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So looking at your ministry and what you do in writing and speaking and internationally, I want to speak to the church. I want to speak to backlash you have received in this work, and what kind of backlash have you received, and have you received backlash from within the church itself?
Yeah, so my primary, my audience is the church, basically. So any backlash I've received is from the church. So I think in the beginning, it was very much like, we don't want your type in our church. I actually had different churches who basically said, we don't want women like you here coming in and corrupting our women. Okay. So, and then I have had groups who, like, I had one group who took a risk with me with a teen conference, and they knew that sexting was an issue among teenagers. And at the protest of many people on the board and many people in the church who were like, absolutely not. Do not bring in this girl to talk to our teenagers about sexting. Like, do not do it. They took that risk. And I went in and shared my story, emphasizing the part about sending pictures. And about grace and redemption for that. And the altar call afterwards was overwhelming. Hundreds of girls were coming forward, and the hosts who had fought so hard to get me there were just standing in the corner crying because they were like, we took a risk with you. They said, you have no idea. We took such a risk with you. And as we watched all of these girls pour forward, and our prayer team that was there to respond was completely overwhelmed. We were calling for more youth leaders. She's like, we realized that we made the right choice. Like, people told us not to bring you. People told us not to let you come. And she says, and then we just watched as all of these girls went forward asking for help and asking for prayer. And she's like, we're like, this is why we do this. This is what we need to do. And so it's tough to be like, oh, well, you're risky. Like we took a risk by bringing you in. Like, why is this a risky thing to talk about? I even had it when I worked as a Sunday school teacher, served as a Sunday school teacher in a church. And I had parents who were basically like, you will not talk to our teenage daughters about this. I said, you don't understand. They already know. Like, I am not introducing information to them. Like, they already know. But there's just this idea that for some reason we think that our Christian girls, especially Christian women, are like these white, pure, virginal things, and that you bring somebody in like you or myself and you're going to corrupt them. Like, we're not there to corrupt. Like, that's not what we do. We're there to kind of pull back the shades and go, they're already hurting. They're already lost. Like, they don't want to be carrying around this mantle of being this white, perfect, holy person. They're broken, and you're just turning this blind eye. But I still, even now, will get, we don't need that in our church. Our church doesn't have this problem. We don't want to have these kinds of like these conversations aren't appropriate for church. It's a lot of this idea of like, you're corrupting our church by coming in and sharing your story. This is an appropriate conversation for church. At the same time, I've had churches that are very welcoming. And I've also had groups that are almost exploitive, unfortunately, of the story and like, woo, like, tell us more. And that's not the point either, obviously. So I think the biggest one has been like, we don't need that here. Our church is like, our women don't have this problem. And so you can just, take your sinful little message and take it somewhere else. And that's probably the biggest kickback. Or I've had people just flat out start arguing with me about how women don't have this problem. And I'll go like,
hi,
I am one. And I have hundreds of emails of other women. So like, that's also not true. That's kind of the major kickback I get is, this isn't a problem for women in our church, and you're going to make it a problem for them by coming in here and talking about it.
Yeah. So what challenge do you have for the pastor who's watching this, for the ministry leader who is watching this? How would you challenge them in this area of female addiction?
Yeah, so two things. If we even say conservatively, this is super conservative, and you'll know this too, say 10% of women struggle with pornography in the church. That is low, right? But we'll go ahead and we'll give you 10, give you 10%. That is 1 out of 10 in your church. And so I think that we need to keep that kind of like in perspective. Statistics are hard. I understand that. Like, if the statistics are that 50% of pastors struggle with pornography, no pastor is going to go, well, I don't. So obviously he does. Like, we don't like to apply statistics to people. So when you're standing up in front of your congregation, looking at your deacons' wives and your Sunday school teachers and your pastors' wives, it's hard to go like, wow, yeah, definitely 10% in my church. Like, you're going, no, it can't be them. It can't be them. It can't be them. Like, those are good Christian girls and those are great Christian women. Like, it can be anybody in here. I think that we need to understand that, like, there is no like type for Christian women who struggle with pornography. In fact, for me, I've almost seen that it's like the ultra Christian women are the ones who struggle the most. Right. The pastors'
the real sexually oppressed women, where sex wasn't talked about at all, and like, so the curiosity took over, and or loneliness took over, or all kinds of reasons.
So I'll get like Bible study teachers and Sunday school teachers and pastors' wives who are like, help. Worship leaders, they're like, I can't tell anybody because of my like position. And so I think we just need to understand that it's in your church, period. And then the other thing is that there's like a generational thing. So it's not super common for like my grandmother's generation at all. My mom's generation, not as common. Millennials, you're starting to see it more. But then when you get down into Generation Z, it's like very prevalent. And so if you're looking at your deacons' wives and asking them if this is a problem, you're going to get it probably not. But I have had churches reach out to me because they've done anonymous surveys of their 9th and 10th grade girls and found 100% of them struggled with pornography. So I think if you're sitting there thinking, well, this isn't a problem, go to your girls, like your high schoolers, and do the anonymous survey thing and put a bunch of different things on there and just see what really is a problem. Like, it might not be a problem for your grandmother, but it could very much be a problem for these high schoolers. And they're the future of our church. And I tell pastors all the time, this is your challenge. By all means, help the men. Like, I'm not saying that this is not an issue for men at all. We know it is. That is not a secret. But understand that while you're out there fighting for your men, you're being flanked. And pornography is coming behind and it's ripping the hearts out of your women. It is gutting them. Like, if they're not the wife of someone who struggles, then they might be a woman who struggles herself. And you're going to fight so hard to free your men, and they're going to come back and there's not going to be women left. Like, the women are going to be so broken. And so I think we have to start having a holistic view of this problem. It's not a man's problem. It's just a sin problem. And it might not be common among your 50-year-old plus women in the church. Like, I acknowledge that. But your future church is hurting. Your teenagers are hurting. Your college women are hurting. And all they need from you, and it's so easy, is just the word "and." They're looking for someone who knows they're there. And so when you're standing at the front going, men, you need to blah, 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 watch what you're doing online, all you have to do is throw in "and women." Like, all you have to do is say men and women struggle with pornography. Parents, talk to your boys and girls about pornography and sex. Like, it's so easy to start that conversation, so easy to change it, but we're just kind of stuck in believing that women don't have this problem. And we do. Mm-hmm. And we really want them to find that hope and that healing. And if they don't feel like they're allowed to have the problem that they have, they do not feel like Jesus can help set them free from it. Like, that's just a barrier that they have. And you can stand at that pulpit and you can talk about grace and you can talk about forgiveness, but until you recognize that you see her in that struggle, shame will tell her that that message of grace is not for her. And until you go in and you break down that wall and you say, and this is also for women who struggle with pornography, she will not make that connection. Shame will keep her from making that connection, and she will not be able to tap into that grace and that freedom and that hope that you're trying to give her. We have to be direct, and we have to be pointed right now, because it's such a taboo topic, and so many women feel that they're alone. So the first thing they have to know is that they're not, and that they're seen, and that we recognize that they have this problem, and that there is grace for them.
Very well said. I love it. Thank you, Jessica. That's much needed to hear. So take word of what she's saying and take it to heart and make the effort. I mean, you have to. So kind of going back to women who struggle, which of course we've been talking about the whole time, but running back to the woman who's watching this right now, the woman who is struggling, who is in the throes of her addiction, who is deep in it, feels hopeless, but is also thinking, maybe there's a little bit of hope. I'm hearing that, there's hope for me. In closing, what would you say to her today? What's one piece of advice, one piece of encouragement, for a first step maybe, that you would say to her today?
Yeah, I think my first thing I would say to her is that Jesus is not disgusted with you. So many women who struggle will say, like, I can't open my Bible because I'm a hypocrite. Like, I can't pray because I'm sure God doesn't want to hear from me at all. And they convince themselves that they're alone in this and that God has left them to figure this out for themselves. And that is not God. That is not grace. That is not the gospel. That's shame talking to you. And if I can say anything to women, it's that Jesus wants to meet you where you are. He is not standing somewhere else and demanding for you to come over to where he is and get your act together first. Like, he's wanting to meet you there. And I think about the women at the well. Like, that's my go-to story when I stand in a church and preach on a Sunday morning. That's my message of John 4 and Jesus right there at the well with that woman and waiting through all her defenses to show her that he is who she's longing for, that he is who she's been waiting for, and he knows everything about her. You're not hiding anything from God. Like, when you don't open your Bible because you're afraid of being a hypocrite, like, God already knows, when you're going through, like, you're pulling an Adam and an Eve, like you're tucking behind a tree, he knows where you are. He knows what you've done, and he wants to meet you there. And so those feelings of, oh, I can't pray, I can't go to God, I can't open my Bible, I'm such a hypocrite and he's disgusted with me and I'm worthless. Like, all of those things aren't him. Like, all of those things are shame. And so if I can encourage the women who are listening, I definitely always encourage women to try to tell somebody. I know it's scary, but man, when that person responds in grace, it's like so freeing. It is so freeing to tell somebody and to start busting through that wall of shame and start breaking down those lies. But even before you get there, like, don't turn your back on God. Like, don't give up on him thinking that he's already given up on you. He's not given up on you. And he wants to help you find hope and to help you find freedom. It does not work like, dear Jesus, please break the internet. Like, that's not how this works. So don't get frustrated when he doesn't like stop you from watching pornography. Like, that's not what he's doing. Like, that's not his business. Like, that's not how he functions. He doesn't zap your computer with a lightning bolt to get you to stop what you're not supposed to be doing. But he does want that relationship with you. And the thing driving you away is not him, it's shame. And so you're able to fight, that's your first almost boxing match with shame, is to go, oh no, like, God still wants a relationship with me. And he tells me to come to him when I'm struggling. And he tells me to come to him for wisdom. And he tells me to come to him in time of need. Like, I'm going to him. Like, I am opening my Bible. I am praying. You, like, get behind me. Like, I'm doing this. And I might be broken and I might be struggling and this might be hard and I might not be getting it right, but I'm still loved and I'm still redeemed. And he still longs for me to have freedom. And I think you have to grab onto that. You have to hang on to that. You have to fight for that against shame.
Thank you, Jessica. For those who want to know more about you, is the best way to reach you just going to beggarsdaughter.com?
Yep, that's the best way.
Okay, we're linking to all of your site, your social medias on the Summit site. So those who are watching right now, if you want to reach out to Jessica, you want to read more of her wisdom, her books, all of her things that she writes about all the time, her books, her blogs. I encourage you to follow her on social media as well. Instagram, she's always giving good nuggets out there in the Insta story. So reach out to her, check her out, and just encourage you to follow her because she knows what she's talking about. So thank you, Jessica, for being with us for the She Summit. I know this will bless many, but I also hope this blesses you as well.
Thank you.